Do you actually have to be on cocaine to be on this podcast?
It's a great day to be a Wildcat!
Cocaine.
Durfing.
What's up, everybody? You are listening to a new season 4 of Cocaine Willie, and I am your commissioner, Bob Trollsby. As always, I am joined by my co-host, the good chef, Andre Napier, and Fireball Matt Marchesini. And a reminder, we are the K-State representative on the College Huddle. Guys, how are we doing?
We're back. Let's go, boy.
Channeling your inner Sam Ellinger there.
Yeah, man. It's good to see you boys. You know, we always need a little bit of a break. Me and Matt. I mean, if you get us 8 consecutive months together, shit will get weird. So I'm glad that we got our little break. But now I can't picture my life without you boys. So
that is the nicest thing you've ever said to us. Wow. What a blessed day. What a blessed day.
A blessed day, indeed.
A blessed day.
However you want to say it. I'm not from Albany, but neither is our sponsor. First, we want to give a shout out to Auntie May's Parlor, located at 616 North 12th Street. They did not move. Right in the heart of Aggieville in Manhattan, Kansas. Auntie May's has been in business for more than 50 years and is an absolute must-visit destination in Aggieville on game days and school nights alike. They feature a wide variety of craft cocktails, draft beers, and everything in between, along with all sorts of events like comedy, live music, bingo nights, trivia smackdown, you name it, they've got it. We have, Wednesday, June 4th, we've got Auntie May's Trivia Smackdown with Jeff Kreutzer.
Wait, should I go?
Yeah, absolutely.
Should I go tomorrow night?
If you're in town, go. Duh, of course.
Oh, no.
On Thursday, June 5th, they've got Travis Futz. I don't know. I'm going to pronounce that kind of somewhat German, vaguely German. Travis Futz and the Stardust Cowboys with Madeline Selby. And then on Saturday, June 7th, we've got Headlight Rivals record release party with Licks and David Spiker.
I love that.
You want a list of all their events, go to auntiemays.com. And they're doing cool stuff like this all the time. So go visit your auntie at 616 North 12th Street in the heart of Aggieville in Manhattan, Kansas. And be sure to tell them Cocaine Willie sent you. All right, guys, we're just going to kind of free flow this thing tonight. We've got some hoop stuff to catch up on, quite a bit of hoop stuff, like basically all the hoop stuff to catch up on. We've got some football stuff, and then obviously the BAAAAAAACK just exited their regional appearance in Austin, Texas. Maybe we start with the BAAAAAAACK. We'll just get that one, knock it out, get it out of the way.
Chronological.
Yeah, take it off the rundown. So the BAAAAAAACK, they obviously played down in Austin, Texas against old friend or foe, the Texas Longhorns, the University of Texas at Austin Longhorns, along with the University of Texas at San Antonio Roadrunners and the Houston Christian. I don't know what their mascot is, but they used to be
Bobcats.
Bobcats. Yeah, they used to be Houston Baptist as well, as I know them as Houston Baptist. And I believe their football stadium shares a parking lot with a Walgreens.
Oh, it's worthwhile. Get it all knocked out at one time.
But the Cats go 1-2 on the weekend. You obviously drop the matchups to the two University of Texases, and you win the game against Houston Christian. So you played to your seed line in a regional where you could maybe debate whether or not K-State should have even been in it to begin with, after how things kind of fell off towards the end of the season and about halfway through. Once that Oklahoma State series happened, I feel like the wheels came off the wagon a little bit.
yeah, the hot start to the season had us contemplating whether this team was, Big 12 championship worthy, if we were going to be able to keep it going. That series with the sweep at Oklahoma State, like you mentioned, and I think there was another sweep, maybe to KU. I don't know who we lost to.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah.
tough. Those ones are hard to come back from when you drop 6 in a row. And then it kind of steamrolled into other things, but you get a little bit of a break towards the end of the season and you have a chance. We were kind of feeling like we were a safe lock into the NCAA tournament, but you could have made moves in the Big 12 tournament, especially with the side of the bracket that you had. It was very, obtainable to at least win 2 games with the single elimination style that they had in the Big 12 tournament this year. So falling in the first round, not ideal. And it kind of spelled disaster of what we could have saw in the NCAA tournament. That was my thinking. If you get into the Big 12 tournament run, it kind of sets you up for the NCAA tournament, especially those games in that regional being kind of a single elimination. So, yeah, it was unfortunate, but it was a good season. I feel like this was a building block season. This wasn't even the best version of this team. So we'll see what we could do next year.
Well, I don't know if I can agree with that last sentence because, especially with the transfer portal, you don't really know how baseball, your college team's going to look. I think it's pretty evident there's some needs, especially in the pitching department. From a consistency perspective, we really saw some struggles there, especially towards kind of the back half of the season. And then there was just some inconsistency on the offensive side too. I mean, if you think about the first game in the Big 12 tournament, against Houston, you come out in 2-0 and, in the first inning and then just can't, your pitching leaves a lot to be desired. And then you can't score anything else after that against, a team that really struggled, throughout Big 12 play. And this is a team that, you won a series against earlier in the year and you just look like you never played them before. So the consistency for this team just was not there. I would say the luck really started in the beginning of the year when you started beating some of these named teams in these tournaments and building your RPI. And I foresee that's going to be a similar situation in 2026 where you're going to be playing really tough schedule in the beginning and admittingly, you could say try and steal some games from some perceived top teams in college baseball. I know they're going to be playing in a tournament down in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metro again next year against some big teams, LSU included. So there's definitely. I was discussing this with some people this past kind of weekend, but the K-State baseball program historically has not necessarily been great, right? A lot of us, probably younger people, will think about the 2012 year and hosting a regional and making it to a super regional. But this is a team in consecutive years that has made the NCAA baseball tournament. You've made a super regional, as an underdog in a bracket. This regional, it was somewhat unfortunate when you're playing the number 2 team in Texas. And then you're playing, admittingly, you could say UTSA team is a pretty hot scoring team. I mean, they scored runs and, they had good pitching to get them out of games. And there's a reason, in these types of regionals where you get on a little bit of a hot streak, you can beat anybody. And we saw that with UTSA. So you could say there's a lot to look forward to, but there's definitely some improvements that have to be made, in bringing in some pitching and then you see who's going to stay for next year too, because there's definitely some young talent in this team that you anticipate is going to, hopefully come back. But again, with the transfer portal, you never know with baseball how that's going to turn out. So.
Yeah, I think the pitching was a big thing. It just didn't. It's not going to help when you're giving up that many runs, especially in regional play. And against UTSA specifically, you gave up 10-2 by the 5th inning or something like that. it's just it's hard to come back from that. It's not impossible, and baseball is one of the few sports where it doesn't matter how many possessions you have. You can have one possession on offense and be up to the plate, and you can score 12 runs. You can score unlimited runs effectively. So it's one of the few sports where that's the case. So it's not impossible to come back from that, but from a more like a morale perspective, from a mental perspective, it's almost impossible. This is kind of just college baseball related, but I want to talk about it because it came up. Are the two of you familiar with Coach Brian O'Connor at the University of Virginia, formerly of the University of Virginia?
I've heard the name, but
so he won a national, he won a national championship in 2015. He played baseball for my dad at Creighton University in 1991 and the year after, I believe, a couple years around there. So went to the College World Series as a player with Creighton, but he's been the head coach of Virginia for, I mean, damn near probably, if I had to guess, probably maybe 20 years at this point, actually. Won a natty there, won a College World Series, multiple College World Series appearances. We obviously played them last year in the Super Regional. And this is just more so related to NIL, SEC, Big Ten, and kind of everybody else. So apparently the ACC, obviously with the revenue sharing, with the roster limits and everything, apparently in the ACC, different schools are obviously going to go about it different ways, but the University of Virginia specifically was only going to have 20 scholarships allocated to baseball. And that's a perennial College World Series contender. You've got a 34 scholarship limit, a 34 roster limit for that sport. And a big reason why he makes the jump to Mississippi State is Mississippi State's going to be able to honor all 34 of those scholarships. So we're starting to see this now unravel a little bit with guys like O'Connor, who, I mean, he was beloved by the fan base there, had a ton of success, a tremendous track record of success in Charlottesville, and makes the jump to an SEC program that I would say that's kind of a red flag to take a job at a school that is firing their head coach after they won a College World Series in 2021 themselves. A little bit of a red flag, but in this day and age, it's all about NIL. How many scholarships are you going to honor? What's your roster limit going to look like? You see it in K-State with the men's basketball team not going to go to the 15 roster limit. They're not going to honor all 15 scholarships. They're just going to go with the 13, at least by all accounts. So it's interesting to see how some of this is starting to roll out and how you're starting to see some longtime coaches like O'Connor dip for higher paying jobs that, hey, look, if they're going to have more resources, if they're going to have more backing for my guys that I'm bringing into the program, I might go and make that jump, even though he's like last of the list of guys that I would have expected to make a jump to another job like that.
Well, that's just the state of the world we're living in college athletics. I mean, men's football down to the 105 rule, just cutting, people's dreams. And with Virginia, baseball probably, I mean, basketball is probably king there, I would say. And then it would go football, but football is the breadwinner for most universities. So when baseball is the third wheel, I mean, I could see why. And a lot of these schools are still, after the allocations of the $20 million that goes from the university, they're still relying on these, the NIL powers of the donors and all the collectives and all of that to still fund a lot of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. So if your collective is not necessarily that big, $20 million can only be spread so far amongst, however many, with Title IX included too. So you got to think of that. It's unfortunate that it's come to this. The NIL kind of backfired for a lot of these student athletes. When you think about it, they, the stipends that they were getting was paying off a lot of stuff. And now a lot of them don't even have scholarships to go to the university itself. So it kind of, the rich got rich. It's kind of, capitalist at its finest. I mean, I don't want to get political on here, but it is what it is. That's kind of what it is. The rich get rich, the poor get poor. And some people just aren't even on the boat. So it sucks for Virginia baseball, but
well, it's funny
kind of
too.
the world we're in.
It's whenever everybody's putting together. I mean, it happened more so probably 2, 3, 4 years ago, but everybody's starting to talk about super conferences, and if we go to like 2 leagues that are 30 or 40 schools each, you hear Virginia a lot, kind of in the same breath with some of those Big Ten programs, and I'm like, I hear a story like this, and I'm like, yeah, they're not in the Big Ten right now, and if they got that bump up, maybe things would be different, but I hear something like that, and I'm like, I don't know that you're on the same playing field as these schools that, you're putting in the same breath, like a North Carolina or a UVA. I feel like North Carolina might be an outlier there.
They only even mention Virginia with the Big Ten because Big Ten still tries to hold on to this prestige of these academic institutions, and that's just so far from where we're even heading in terms of athletics. It's just so stupid to even think that would be a possibility. So, I mean, it's all about, if we continue the road that we're on, it's all about what do you bring to the TV market? What do you bring in viewers, and how can that be allocated to, the rest of the conference? Can you hold your weight up? And it's funny with those super conferences, not to get on a whole diatribe about this, but the super conferences, donors help a lot with this. And if your team, Oklahoma's a perfect example. If Oklahoma continues to go 5-7 in the SEC, they're going to diminish their brand more than it was helping in the long term, in my opinion. So I don't know. It's just silly for these super conferences because somebody's gonna have to lose a lot usually. So it sucks to suck.
So on the note of scholarships and roster limits and the march to 105, I know we were tracking that for a while with football. I do want to talk about football, maybe just do kind of a big spring overview, because K-State, the way we do it, the way we've done it since climbing, there's no spring game. We've got some practices. They cut down on the total number of practices this year. And, a school like Iowa State's maximizing the number of practices that they have. So it's interesting to see each program kind of go their own way. I think just kind of big picture, one big shift that I've seen is a lot of other schools are starting to do what Chris Kleiman really kind of pioneered back in 2019 when he went away from the spring game. You see schools like Texas, a lot of these SEC and Big Ten programs are going away from having a spring game, having, their intra-squad game in favor of doing these more like OTA style practices and OTA style, whether it's just analyzing the playbook, getting these early enrollees in the system, getting them, going through the motions with practice. I don't know exactly how it all plays out in practice, but it's interesting to see kind of this broader shift. We're seeing a lot more bigger name programs and stuff join the fold with K-State. I guess for the two of you, how do you feel about that? Do you think that makes sense? And do you miss the days of being able to have a spring game and watch some of these games on ESPN that get broadcast and see Will Howard in his Ohio State debut like he was last year in the Scarlet and White game? Is that what they do?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some nostalgia with the spring game. But admittingly, I mean, I look back on, the few spring games that I attended, when I was a student here, and you don't get much out of it at all. I understand the mindset now with especially the spring transfer portal and potentially having a game that other coaches, you may be getting game tape on players that may end up going to the portal and using the game as an opportunity to kind of strengthen their, resume and then stepping into the portal. But in reality, I mean, I don't think programs are going to miss the spring game as much as fans would miss the spring game. I just think, especially from a football perspective and how college athletes are now almost treated like professional athletes with getting paid and, there's high expectations. You are in a situation where you probably have you have contract, this contract and everything like that. You want to just continue the same motion that you're doing practice after practice and not changing it, for one day, one game where it doesn't really mean anything. The Bill Snyder spring games were really, really tough to watch, especially just, because it was the A offense against the B defense. And, you weren't really seeing anything out of it, to where I feel like a program for, such as ours needs the media out there and needs, fans watching and judging and, posting things about it on social media, that aren't necessarily accurate. So, big programs, I could see why, some programs may use it in different ways, but and Chris Kleiman, we see likes to keep things close to the chest, especially, through the years. And, but, I can understand why you want to just continue the same motion through the year or through the spring, doing the same practice, or, just having a similar routine all throughout instead of one last thing that doesn't really mean anything.
And with the style that he went to this spring, with the more weightlifting emphasis and not so much on the field stuff, trying to get these guys as beefy as possible, I think, a spring game is just be silly. I mean, you'd have less install time, so you're more in the weight room. So it would be silly to even try to have something where you're having a third wide receiver go against a third corner and it's just sloppy. It's just not worth it. I think the physical attributes before Tremaine Carroll left was, I think, the good strategy to have, especially with the early start to the season. You want to get these guys as strong as possible, so that because it is a long season with, playing week 0, having a couple buys, which is a good thing, but you want these guys in physical peak shape, especially how much weight these guys lose throughout the season. So I like the style that they implemented this spring. It's less on the field, more getting Avery Johnson to a 205-pound of swollen muscle. So I like that more than just seeing, the fourth running back break a 60-yard run versus a walk-on. Shout out to them.
Yeah. And the one of the other big storylines going into this spring was cutting down the roster, similar to what we already mentioned. How do you think the coaching staff went about this process? Do you feel like there's anybody who was left out of that process who didn't quite make that 105 that you would have liked to see stick around? Or do you feel like the coaching staff made all the right choices? It was probably mutual in some cases. Just curious what you think about how the coaching staff went about this, who they parted ways with, and you think we ended up on the better side of it?
I mean, maybe it's bad to look at this, but you see some of the players that did, kind of that exited the program and where they ended up. Maybe that's a bad comparison. I think potential is always interesting. Like Noah King, didn't he he went to Miami, right? Did he transfer over?
I saw he had an offer from them. I don't know if he committed or not. I don't know exactly where he went.
I'm guessing out of all the players, he's the one that's probably going to have the most notable school that is going to pick him up overall. So there were a couple guys. I mean, Boone Morris was someone that I was interested to kind of see what he was going to do in the program. But I know from a linebacker perspective, we're like pretty, we've got a lot of talent in the linebacker space. And I think Jake Stonebreaker was another one I was interested to see a little bit, but it's tough. I think, especially with the 105, at the time, it was the right thing to do from a program perspective to give kids the ability to put their name in the portal at the last second. even though there was the potential that it was going to get drawn back or things were going to change, which, makes a lot of sense. There's no rules, it feels like, anymore. So, but in a nutshell, a lot of these players are ones that, may not necessarily see the field at all anyway. You're now in a position where you have a little bit less from a player perspective, but you can put more eyes on this more limited group to see what you have. But the entire situation is really unfortunate from an outsider's perspective, because is this really good for the college student athlete at all? Putting a limit like this, we see, the type of success that we've had as a program is obviously taking kids who, did not necessarily have a ton of scholarships. They're going to come in and walk on. And we've seen the success of that work for us. And for now, when you're in a position where you're at whatever 105, you're not necessarily able to take some of that talent from the state of Kansas, especially that, maybe in 2016, this player would have had an opportunity to walk on and really build themselves up to potentially, become a player that, we've seen have success here. And it's not necessarily that case anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrible. And like you hinted at it, just having the bodies around, even though they might never see the field, these guys are making the team better by being around, having the bodies to practice the best. What's the style that they were doing? They were doing two ways, like they were having two quarterback systems on one side of the field and the other side of the field, and that's just not possible with the 105, because a lot of these guys you're trying to implement into seeing the field, so they're not able to be on a scout team or anything like that. It's terrible, and it really limits the kind of players that you even have. Like Matt was saying, you have these projects that you would throw a flyer on because they have the physical ability, or they have some room to grow. Does a Felix Anudike-Uzomah have an opportunity at K-State if the 105 rule is implemented when he's in school? You never know, because there's guys that are walking around 205 pounds that are able to grow to a 245, 255 pound frame and become legendary. So it stinks that you're limiting those opportunities. But the positive is overall your team is condensed and better. So it is really good on good. So you should be having the best of the best go up against each other. And it's just like Matt said, less eyeballs that less players that these coaches have to keep their eye on. So everybody's getting a little bit of the coaching from the top down. So I hate the 105 rule personally myself. Just giving these guys opportunities to go to school and live their dreams is really that's what college athletics should be about. And no one's asked. It's funny because all these people are making these decisions in Washington and all this stuff, and Indianapolis, wherever the NCAA is, they're making those decisions, but no one's asked the players what they want. No one's asked that. Like, it's crazy. Like, did the players vote for this? I don't think so. It's just crazy that this is where we're at. So this is a bash the state of college athletics podcast right now. So I could keep it going, though.
I could too. I'm not Bob Trollsby because I love what's happening right now. All right. I want to talk preseason win-loss records for the Big 12. So they came out like 4 weeks ago, something like that. K-State, Texas Tech, and gosh, who else is on here? K-State, Texas Tech, 8.5 wins each.
Arizona State, maybe?
Arizona State, I believe, is also at 8.5 wins. So those three were picked to have 8.5 wins. Baylor, Iowa State, and Kansas, and Utah at 7.5. We have TCU. Let's see. TCU, Colorado, Cincinnati, UCF. And that's it for 6.5 wins. And then Arizona, Houston, Oh, BYU. We've got BYU at 7.5 as well. Arizona, Houston, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia at 5.5.
Let's go.
Gut reaction to where everybody's slated out. I mean, you've got basically a projection for a 3-way tie for first in the Big 12 with 3 teams that could go either 8-4 or 9-3, the way they're looking at it.
I mean, it's crazy that you have, I mean, Matt, you could get in here too, but I mean, it's crazy that 1 through 9 is separated by 2.5 games, 1.5 games. It's nuts, the parity in this league. I think some of those numbers are a little, if it wasn't coming from Vegas, I would think they were trolling, but that's just me. I mean, Kansas at 7.5, insane. I think Houston is a sneaky team. I think Houston's going to be sneaky. To me,
dude, they got the A&M guy. They got the A&M guy.
Connor Wegman, former 5-star.
Wegman.
You never know. I think they've had a lot of talent. They beat us, for God's sakes. I'll never forget that one in the monsoon rain. I think the parity in this league is awesome. I think some of these teams are due for some breakouts, and I think there's some duds in here that are just rolling off a name. I'm excited. I think the top 3 are correct, though. Even though Arizona State might be fraudulent, I don't know. Who do they have at running back? I'm not sure.
I mean, I will say this: like, the parity of the Big 12 sounds fun when you think about it, but for the strength of the league, it's not good. I really think you need to have 2 teams that are going to be consistently talked about from a college football playoff perspective. And if it means that it ruins the parity of the league, I'm 100% in on that. I think you really want to have teams. You want to have 2 teams winning 11 games in this league, year after year. Parity sounds fun because it brings chaos, right? When you think about chaos, as fans, we like seeing chaos. We like seeing upsets. We like seeing teams you don't expect to be in the conversation, actually in the conversation. But what it's going to do is it brings the perceived value of the league down. And for us, like, thinking about it from a K-State perspective, I don't care about parity. I want to go 12-0. You want to be undefeated in the league. Arizona State, I want to see Arizona State go 12-0. I want to see them, or whoever, so that you have 2 strong teams going at it for the Big 12 championship every year.
Okay, but your argument is based on the college football playoff, though. That's
100. It's about the college football playoff, but it's the perception of the league, because we saw last year you have these teams like Arizona State, BYU, who are not picked high in the league. They have great years. They finished 10-2, whatever, in the league. But the perception of the Big 12, when we were talking about the college football playoff, was not very good for a good portion, back half portion, to where Arizona State gets the 4 seed because they're, but it's quite possible that they could have been missed out on that and been an 11 or 12, in this playoff. So for me, when I think of a strong Big 12, I think of a conference that has 2, you can put 3 in there if you want, 2 or 3 teams that are going to win at least 11 games during the year.
Okay, so for me, I think it's the opposite, because the perception of the Big Ten before, they added USC and Oregon to those conferences was that it was so top heavy that it was a joke of a league, that there was only 2 teams that were really good in it. Mind you, they were potential national championship winning teams that could get it done. The Big 12, because we don't recruit well enough, the perception of our league will never be that, even if we have 2 teams that are absolutely blowing everybody out, that we are a national championship worthy conference. We don't recruit well enough. We don't recruit like the SEC. We don't have those big name brands. Like if we had Texas and OU still, I could get on board with that. But we have a conference that, to stay relevant, we have to have the parity in the conference where every game kind of matters. That it's going to be, you don't know what you're going to get. Because if we have two teams in the conference that no one respects because they don't think they can win a national championship, the college football playoff doesn't mean anything then. Then you have no game that matters between a 4-8 team and a 3-9 team. We have no chance in that one. But if we have a team that's, 6-2 and a team that's 5-3, I think we have a chance of having our brand out there as these teams are battling out. This is a gut punch and a knife fight every freaking week.
Yeah, we're not on the same page with that because like people. It may be true that the perception of the Big 12 is not going to ever be, based off of recruiting, based off of this and that. But if you have two teams that are in the league that are 10-0, they're in the conversation. They're going to be in the playoff conversation.
You would think that, but if you leave it up to what the SEC and the Big Ten want to do, where they're putting more emphasis on strength of schedule, that's what their messaging has been from day one, with trying to get rid of the group of five, and teams like in the ACC and the Big 12 is saying, even if we go 9-3, our 9-3 is better than a 10-1 or 11-1 Big 12 because they didn't have to go against anybody. That's why I said if you want the perception of the league to matter, you have to have parity in it, not just these teams that are going to get no respect either way.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you will always look at the record next to the team's name, and that will put people who don't watch the Big 12, they'll see the ranking and they see a team from the Big 12 who's 10-0 or 10-1. They don't care about the mid-tier teams in that league, and they don't, they're not necessarily going to put eyeballs on the Big 12 because, of this parity of whatnot. I think ultimately, if you want the strength of the Big 12 to be perceived stronger, you have to have teams that are you have to have that top heavy aspect instead of, this team could win at any moment or lose at any moment.
Okay, so this is a perfect example for this scenario then. What did you think of Indiana last season?
I was literally going to ask the same thing.
What I think of Indiana last year?
What did you think of Indiana? They were undefeated until they played Ohio State. What did you think of them? Because honestly, everybody laughed at their record, their strength of record, because they played nobody, because the rest of the conference was absolute garbage. But they were 10-1. They got into the college football playoff, but it was a joke. Everybody laughed at them playing Notre Dame.
They're steamrolling, Northwestern and Purdue.
If I'm an Indiana fan, I don't give a shit about that.
Right, if you're an Indiana fan, but if you're a Big Ten fan, they're like, what the hell? Why is our conference getting laughed at?
I don't know. I don't necessarily like, for us, we have this underdog mentality in the conference because which we should, which is totally fine. But where I'm coming from, like, I'm a fan of K-State. Like, yes, I want to see teams from the Big 12 do well. But in the grand scheme of things, if K-State goes 11-1, goes 12-1, they win the Big 12. I don't care what other people are saying about K-State making the college football playoff. They're made the playoff. Like,
no, I get that.
I don't, you could respect or disrespect how Indiana got there, but they won all their games. And you think about it, like,
no, I get what you're saying, but the argument was that, the perception is bad for Indiana because they're not a blue blood program. And if they go 11-1 versus absolute nobody, a team like LSU that goes 9-3, just hypothetically, a team like LSU is going to say that they are more deserving, which some people might argue that they are. So for me, I want to keep it all Big 12 all the way. I don't give a damn about the college football playoff, me personally, unless K-State is undefeated and we are like, oh, we're beating our chest like we can win the national championship. I would rather a lot of teams go 9-3 in the conference and it is a knife fight and we're like really on the edge of our seat because I enjoy Big 12 football. I don't care about what they do over there. I'm all about me. Whether that's good for you could say that whether that's good for the Big 12 or not, I don't know how they would market it because, they're trying to implode our conference every day as it is, whether we're going undefeated or we're not. I want to enjoy this and I want to have a brotherhood of the Big 12. Like it is going to be parity. We're going to be fighting. I want to see good football.
I think Brett Yormark would prefer to have two potential teams in the college football playoff instead of attempting to market parity of having your conference champion be 9-3. Well,
10-3. We won it 10-3. And when we went 10-3 that year, we would have been in there because the playoff committee would have put us in. So it's a double-edged sword. If we're going off of what the committee might do, I think the committee respects the Big 12 a lot more than you think. But the perception of the nation thinks that we suck, and it's just not going to go away either way.
And I think the perception of the nation may think that, and ultimately you have people who don't watch Big 12 football that are just looking at the rankings, and they're just going to look at how teams are doing on a week-to-week basis, and they're going to look at your final ranking to determine if you're a good team or not, no matter what. And there's a lot of people that are going to do that. They're not going to watch, a lot of Big 12 games, not going to watch a lot of ACC games. And so ultimately how I think of this is, if you want to build the strength and the perception of the Big 12, you have to have teams, you have to have it be a little bit top heavy. And you have to have the record at the end that shows this team, whether an 11-1 team that wins the Big 12, they could lose 49-0 to somebody. It's totally possible.
But I don't want that. That is worse for the brand. That is worse because our best team that we could possibly send to the world is getting absolute smoked by a 9-3 team in the college football playoff. That is terrible for the brand. It's so possible, bad.
But having two teams, if there's the potential that you have two teams and it's a top heavy league, I think you play the odds. You play the odds a little bit better there. We just have different mindsets of it. I feel there are times where I enjoy the parity of the Big 12, but to build, I think, a football brand in the Big 12, the parity it's not necessarily a good conversation to have your number one team somehow losing a game on the road to some 4-5 team, that is then going to tank your college football playoff ranking that they talk about consistently in the media. It's things like that where the parity we can enjoy as fans of the Big 12, but for people who don't necessarily watch a lot of Big 12 football, all they're looking at is the college football playoff ranking to see where our teams are at, which is unfortunate. And that's why I would rather have a couple teams completely dominate the league, and then you have the conversation of whether those teams are relevant enough in the playoff when we get there.
But for me, if you're getting to the point where, and this might be my last thing, is if you get to a team, your best team is undefeated, or there's a one-loss team in the conference, and we're having to decide whether this team is good enough, that's bad for the state of the conference if our best is not even good enough and it's even an argument. So for me, I would rather, the best case scenario, if the SEC and the Big Ten idiotically decide that they want to have 4 guaranteed spots. People think that's bad. For the rest of the country, I think that's a steal. To even think that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be limited to 8 guaranteed spots in a 16 or 14 team field, I think you take that and run. If the Big 12 is guaranteed 2 spots in this world, Matt gets what he wants and I get what we want. I think you take that and run. So for me, I don't want to have to argue to a person that doesn't watch our brand of football whether our best is good enough for them. I would rather have just real good football that we all can enjoy and let them decide if they want to watch or not.
Yeah. I've got so many thoughts. My heart is with Jeff and my mind is with Matt, I think, on this argument. And when you're talking about sending like a 12-0 or 12-1 team to the college football playoff and then they get steamrolled by someone, I just think of that 2019 Oklahoma game where they got shellacked by LSU, like 63-28 is what I'm seeing here. Okay, Big 12 champ, 12-1 going into that game, great. And then I remember all the discourse after that game was, oh, it's because the Big 12 sucks and this and that. And
but that was they played an LSU team that was one of the best college teams from a historical perspective.
No doubt. But but if like, okay, so for instance, in that season, our best wouldn't have to go against Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and all those all-stars that they had on that team, but we would have had to go against another team, and let's just say we slipped up versus them. It would have even been worse. And I know you just take your gamble of our best versus anybody, but the perception of the league, I would rather have parity. That's why I would rather have parity, because if our best is, fighting with the rest of our conference, and then we just so happen to get to the playoff, if we lose, we weren't really that good to begin with. We were fighting with each other. But if we win, I mean, we're back on top. It's cool. It's money in hand. I don't know how else.
In my head, the best case scenario is what happened in 2022, where you've got a 11-1 or 11-2, I guess. Well, no, what they would have been 12-1 after they
were undefeated until us. So
yeah, so it was 12-1. TCU team loses the conference championship to a team that's ends up being 10-3 at that point, I think, going out of the championship.
Yeah, after we won, yeah.
And then in this playoff format, both teams get in. And in a 5+11 scenario, I think both teams get in as well, which that would require them to go the 5+11 route. But on that note, there's kind of two schools of thought right now. And I think the court of public opinion and the Big 12 and the ACC and Notre Dame all want this 5+11 college football playoff format. And then the Big 10 and the SEC are going for this 4+4+2+2+1 format, which 4 teams get in from the Power 2 of the Big 10 and the SEC, which I hate myself for even saying that. Power 2 bullshit. But they would skip conference championships. Like there's no conference championship game anymore in that scenario.
How I've heard it described is that they're adding, because the SEC is, their contract is up the same year as ours is up. They would want to add more, quantity of games to their season. So the top 2 seeds in that conference are basically locked in. They would play their game for the SEC championship. Then 6 through 3 all play each other in, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5, and those 2 winners, no matter what standing they were in their conference, goes on to the college football playoff. And then those teams that lost have a chance to be in the at-larges, basically. But it's basically guaranteeing the Big 12 2 seats at the table every year, which might not always be true in a 5+11.
Fair. But I think my issue with it is aren't we just going to end up in this situation where, we for the last probably 10 years, we've had players sit out of bowl games because the games don't matter, right? At what point does it turn into the NFL where the last, if you've already got your playoff spot decided where you're going to be, aren't you going to just sit your starters and play your
in the SEC, if you're 3 through 6 are battling to even get a chance to go to as a guaranteed spot to the playoff.
I'm talking
nobody. Oh, the top 1 and 2. If they've separated themselves, sure. Why not? Who cares? At this point, everybody's getting to this NFL model. I don't think a lot of people are going to step away from, that last regular season spot when you're probably in the SEC. Mind you, they're only playing 8 conference games, so they're probably playing Mercer or somebody garbage anyway. So who cares if they're sitting their starters versus them, or they're playing Vanderbilt or something like that? But if it's the last week of the season, I don't think Alabama players are going to sit out the Auburn game. I don't think that. I think the regular season matters more in that playoff seeding structure, in my opinion. I don't know what we do with if the top 2 are guaranteed in the Big 12. Do we have a Big 12 championship game? I don't know how that works. I don't know, but that's really a game that people would sit out. Like, why are we playing this if we're already guaranteed in it? So
yeah,
I don't know. That might kill off Dr. Pepper's branding, but whatever.
Which format do you prefer, Matt?
Whatever format the Big 12 gets its 2 11-1 teams in. So I don't care about parity at all. So 5, whatever, no, 4, probably the 4-4-2, situation. And admittingly, I think that's gonna, it will so-called probably help the Big 10 and the SEC. But I also think, especially from a Big 12 and an ACC perspective, it does give you the opportunity in a 16-team field to potentially, play some of these potentially lesser teams in those conferences, and it gives you, a good fight. In reality, I'm just looking out for how can K-State benefit from something like this. Admittingly, the 4-4-2 is probably going to be the best option, for the conference to get, to get 2 schools in there, and you play it out and see how it goes. Because at the end of the day, the perception of the Big 12 and the ACC is not going to change over time, unless one of those teams wins a national championship, like that. And you think of, it's not the perception at when they're picking it, right? It's the perception through the entire season. And, you hear, things about these conferences very consistently through the season. And all that matters is how these teams are playing against each other and what their record is. Like that is how it looks when you hear it every Tuesday and you hear all the pundits every day talk about the college football playoff rankings. That is what they talk about. And so if it means that on those rankings, they're showing K-State in the top 2 consistently through the year, that should be all that matters for us. Not necessarily a fight between 7 schools because everybody's at, 6-3 or however. That's not even possible. But
obviously, selfishly, that is what K-State wants. But as a conference, you have to acknowledge the fact that if 2 teams are in it and the rest is out, that's a bad look for the rest of those conferences. Because if they're falling behind even further in a lesser conference than the SEC and the Big 10, they'll never have a chance. They won't. If 2 teams separate themselves, okay, mind you, this is exactly how we got to this situation to begin with. Texas was such a big brand. Oklahoma was a big brand and always won the conference. Also, there's contributing factors to that, but those teams separated themselves financially and on the field, and they got plucked away. Not to say that, Kansas State would be such a big brand, or Texas Tech has, 20 oil billionaires at their disposal to make sure that they have a roster that is suitable to the SEC or whatever. But if those teams separate consistently for 4 or 5 years, the next contract comes up, who knows if they're even in the conference anymore?
Yeah.
It's
Be
it's
fine with
quite
me.
possible, like
Fine with me if I laugh.
it's really quite possible, like stuff's going to get blown up, and this is a moot conversation. But I think we have to take it almost like a year by year basis, right? So like this upcoming year, the ranking is changing because they're going to seed it, top 12 seed.
Yeah.
Which is automatically going to kill, the Big 12 in a lot of ways, unless they have a team that goes 13-0, they can at least be in the conversation, being potentially a, 3, 4, 5 situation. Who knows? But
I think we'll be surprised by what the committee thinks of the Big 12. I think we're going to be honestly shocked. I mean, if we have decent teams, they're going to respect it. I just don't think that they're just ready to kill off college football altogether. I just don't think that the committee is willing to do that. Well, I mean, if the SEC and the Big Ten have their way, maybe so. But I don't know if the committee, they're just looking at football. They're just wanting the teams to play. I mean, they put Boise State in. I mean, obviously that helped that they won their conference and that Clemson beat in the playoffs.
And they had a front runner playing a running back.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into what the playoff committee is going to think, and I don't think they're going to poo-poo the Big 12 just because we have that Big 12 stickers. I'm ready to talk some basketball. I got some crowding.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to pivot over to basketball after that anyway, so this is perfect timing. All right. Where do we even begin? Because our last discussion about basketball was a no good, very bad, very, very ugly, sad conversation about how awful the previous season had gone. It was about roster construction. It was about Tang being a roll the ball out there head coach, and about how there probably needs to be some staff changes to the coaching staff. So we have done a lot of things in the last 3 months, 2 months since we last spoke. And I guess let's start with the coaching staff. York Malagy exits. There's some other turnover from, I think, a video coordinator leaves. You get Matthew Driscoll coming in from the University of North Florida. So we poached a sitting head coach who, averaged around 20 wins per season. You poached a low major head coach, which is kind of wild to think about. But a former Scott Drew guy, a former Tang, Tang has roots and pedigree that goes all the way back with Matthew Driscoll. Then you got Bill Peterson, who, for all intents and purposes, has coached at basically every level. He hasn't seen a ton of success, I would say, as a head coach at the college ranks, but he has a ton of experience, and he's had to coach all types of guys with, making money, not making money, and everything in between. But again, another Scott Drew, Baylor coaching tree situation. So you get those two guys, and I think you immediately see this is more or less a flip of like offensive coordinator and getting a new defensive coordinator. You've got Rodney Perry in effectively a diminished role, and you no longer have York Malagy at the table. So what do you think of these two hires? How do you think they're going to have an immediate impact on how this team plays come 2025-26 season tip-off?
Go first. Matthew Driscoll, just from what you've seen, his style and how he innovates offensively, because I don't want to talk about his defensive metrics at North Florida. They didn't play defense. They're pretty terrible all the way around. But offensively, 3 and get to the rim. I mean, that's kind of what basketball is now. I mean, trying to kill the mid-range game and, everything that Dud McDaniels basically did last year and the team as a whole last year did. We're just getting rid of it because we didn't get to the rim. We didn't get to the foul line. We weren't that good at shooting threes because nobody respected us getting to the rim. So, I mean, if he brings an offensive style with the players that we're eventually going to talk about, I think that is more conducive to winning basketball at the college level right now. So I'm excited because, an associate head coach on this team with head coaching experience, you love to see that. That's kind of important to have that in that role, in my opinion. No knock on York Malagy, but my God, I mean, the defense, he was supposed to be the defensive guy. defense was wavering, and supposedly, Jerome Tang took over for that. I'm not going to, give Jerome Tang too many flowers right now. He's got to prove it, but he's assembled a staff that I think is more conducive to winning right now.
And I think he's I think he understands there's a lot of pressure on him, for the season. Whether he has a poor season this upcoming year and is let go is probably a moot point. I mean, he's probably still here for a bit. And so I understood the moves that he made. If you think of Matthew Driscoll and his time at North Florida, I mean, just from a recent perspective and who he's coached, who he's recruited to his program, who he's developed, Chaz Lanier. There's 2 guys from North Florida that are committed to Indiana from this transfer portal cycle. So there's talent that he brought in and, help develop and get them ready for them to move to a bigger opportunity in a major conference. So I think that's an important point to all of this is as much of an offensive mind and the thought process of bringing in an offensive mind, to really change things up. He's also a guy who's developed players, and that's going to be extremely important, especially for another kind of reset button, that was hit here in the offseason with the number of guys that have left this program. There's a really good opportunity to take some of this talent that, has come through in this transfer portal cycle and develop them and be in a position where you can have some continuity for your next season. I know we're going to talk about some of the players here in a second, but I think it was really good to get a coach of admittingly kind of this caliber who has shown, the ability to develop in a program and bring him to Manhattan. So I'm excited to see how the offense will shift and change for this upcoming season.
So when we're talking about the additions, this was a very interesting transfer portal cycle because I think there were guys Tang this whole season was saying, okay, we're going to keep guys around. We're going to go for the Houston model. We're going to build around a core of young players and try to develop them over time. We can't, going back to the Drake game, they've got guys who have been playing in this system for 6 years now because of the COVID year. And we see yet again a complete roster flip where the only 3 returners counting Tyreek Smith are Tyreek Smith, Taj Manning, and Moby Ike-Garuka. And
David Castillo
as well. So you've got those 3 guys plus maybe the 4th in Tyreek Smith. And again, a complete roster flip outside of that. So, and you're even decommitting a guy in on top of that as well, because you have one of your commits stuck around. So it was weird because I'm following this whole cycle and I'm like, okay, we get the Serbian guy. Great. Big fan of Serbian basketball players as a Jokic fan myself. We've, hopefully Kostic can follow in Big Brother Jokic's footsteps. You've got Kamari McGriff was an early guy, but didn't flash on paper, right? He's a guy that had leadership awards in the Colonial Athletic Conference or whatever. You've got Abdi Bashir, another Colonial Athletic Conference guy playing at Monmouth, who's a horrible basketball team, but he put up numbers on a horrible basketball team. So on paper looks better, but you have to take that with a grain of salt. Nate Johnson, MAC Player of the Year, great addition, solid addition, was one that I was definitely excited about. Stephen Osei then comes into the fold, and you're like, okay, we're getting a community college player from Casper, Wyoming, who's unavailable for next year. Why are we wasting a scholarship spot on that? And in the midst of all this, you've got Doug McDaniel leaving. You've got multiple other guys leaving the program. And again, it begs this question of what is the plan here? What is the strategy here? And then finally, you get PJ Haggerty comes in from Memphis. He is one of 3 All-Americans all time in the transfer portal era to transfer from one institution to another. The other 2 are Hunter Dickinson and Max Asmus, who we were also in the lottery for with the Max Asmus lottery at that point in time. And really the prevailing sentiment has been, okay, now it makes sense. All of these guys are going to effectively play the role that they were brought in to play. It's not going to be radically different from what they were doing at their previous institution, which I think going back the last 2 seasons, really, when you look at some of those portal classes, you're bringing in guys who they're not being asked to do the same role. They're being brought in to play a different role on this team, to maybe be, the leader on the team or step into a leadership role where maybe that wasn't what was asked of them before. Or you've got Coleman Hawkins, who's doing something pretty radically different from what he was supposed to have been doing, the previous 4 years that he spent at Illinois, or 3 years he spent at Illinois. So I guess where did you land with all of this, knowing that the prevailing sentiment was not very good about this portal class, with the exception of maybe Nate Johnson, until we get to, okay, PJ Haggerty lands. Does it all make sense? Are you taking it with a grain of salt? Are your expectations high, or are you setting the bar low? Because I think I'm still going to set the expectation bar low, but I'm pleasantly surprised with how things have turned out.
Okay, I'll say this. The PJ Haggerty edition is going to completely change the mindset of what this team can do this upcoming season. I think he is a different player than who we've brought in the past. I think of him a lot as a guy who is going to be a complete difference maker for a team, aka like a Keontae Johnson. It makes also a lot of sense with some of the players that we've brought in. I think of Nate Johnson as, he was obviously all MAC defensive player. The fact that you can have a guard who can really focus 100% on defense, and take the number one guy on the offense or on the opposing team every night, is just going to leave everyone else with an opportunity on the offensive end to take advantage. You're not exerting so much on the defensive end. I've seen the highlights from Kostic this past weekend. He seems like just a potential game changer from his perspective, or from my perspective. There's definitely some points that, you wonder from the Bigs perspective and what the front court, is going to look like. But I really think the PJ Haggerty edition is just a complete season changer. I don't think of it as like what was with Coleman Hawkins. Obviously with Coleman, there was a lot, we're bringing in this guy for a lot of money, and he showed a lot at Illinois, right? He showed he was a talented player at Illinois. I didn't think he wasn't necessarily the best fit for who was on the team and what the program was constructed for. I think a lot of the players here fit what the roster construction needed to look like this season. Ask me in January, maybe this will be just a completely a completely off base, but I really think this team could be an NCAA tournament team with just this one addition because of the ball dominant nature that he is. I believe he's a guy who's going to be the guy. He has the capability to be the guy, which we haven't necessarily had on this team the past couple of seasons. And most importantly, he's shown in this conference that he's just, he showed in the AAC, the ability to be, the number one guy for a Memphis team that I know lost in the NCAA tournament in the first round, but he's just showed his talent. So I'm very excited to see what happens.
Yeah, I've got to eat some crow. I'm going to be honest, because after the addition of Stephen Osei, I was totally lost. I was in a sea of emotions, you could say, because I had no idea where he was going with this roster. You had pieces. You said something interesting, Bob, that, you bring in these guys that are doing something that they've never done before. I'm all for players trying to get to a spot to try to broaden their game, to try to, reach peaks in their game to get to the next level or become a more valuable basketball player down the road in their career. whether that's overseas or whatever. But, trying to fit a square peg in a round hole is kind of where this roster was going, with Nate Johnson potentially being your best player and having to rely on an 18-year-old foreign-born player that's never played college basketball into the toughest basketball conference in America was going to be a reach at best to see if we were going to be a successful program. But you add PJ Haggerty, who is, you could say that he's bounced around from every school 4 colleges in 4 years. That's kind of insane. And sometimes that would bring up red flags. But with everything people are saying about him as a young man, not necessarily what his father is doing or whatever, but, people are that's going to be around you when you're talented, but the production is there. And this raises the floor of this team immensely. Just think of it like Matt was saying, you're having role players actually play role positions. So if they do surprise you, similar to what, that first season where we went to the Elite Eight, when Naquan Tomlin was a guy that we just thought was this wiry kid that could handle the ball a little bit, he raises his game to be the third best player on the team. And then you have an Ishmael Massoud, who we, arguably didn't think was going to play that much, but he played some of the most pivotal spots and pivotal roles on the team, even playing 5 in certain situations. And I think that's what like a Marcus Johnson can do. He is a big body guy that is, I think his game is Ishmael Massoud for that season. He's a great shooter. I'm not expecting him to put the ball on the court, and he's big enough that he could sit there at the 4 or 5 when they're playing small. So he's constructing this team very similar to what he did in 2022. It's spooky to think about. You have a Desi Sills guy, which coaches could be that guy. So, there's a whole smorgasbord of types of players on this team. And in the Driscoll offense, who knows what this team could do, because the guards we have get to the rim and they score and they get to the free throw line, which is spooky, because that's really how you dominate college basketball, with the whistles and how things are being played. There could be a game where you foul out the entire other team. You never know, or you're draining 3. So there's a lot of versatility that just one player's addition made possible for this basketball team. And I don't think they're finished. So I think there is a piece that, I don't know specifically, but I think there is a piece that can be added to make this team an upper echelon team.
On that note, we kind of need a big. Tyreek Smith, kind of a big, right? But that's kind of the guy at this point. And assuming he gets his waiver, I think there's still a spot here for true center to come in and be that guy. Who do you think K-State should bring in who's still available? I know there's been some fodder and chatter about a couple of different guys, but what's the archetype that you're looking for, if you don't want to name names either?
I don't want to discount Kamari McGriff either. I think Tyreek, you could look at these two players and see what their production was like. And McGriff, was a guy at UNC Wilmington who, he was only playing 19, 20 minutes a game. But he had some pretty good production there. Obviously coming to the Big 12, it's going to be, a very different atmosphere when it comes to the 5s and the forwards you're going to be playing against. But I don't want to dismiss him, because I do think that I think the potential is out there that you're going to see, yes, another big come in, but it isn't going to be the expectation that you're going to get some international big that's going to come in and play 20 or 25 minutes a game. I think maybe respectfully a little farcical. If you can get a guy, that, plays 15 to 17 minutes a game and spells these 3, and you have 3 different, kind of aspects. Who I would love to see, or the type of player, from a length perspective, Admittingly, a guy like Bay Fall would have been really nice to continue to keep because of his length, and you spell him with these two others. We aren't necessarily going to have, I would say, like a huge shot blocker compared to maybe some past seasons. Whether they were good shot blockers or not is notwithstanding. But to at least have some length. So a 6'10", 6'11" guy would be a really nice get if you find somebody from an international perspective. I just think we're pretty late in the portal, right? And so you're not going to have a game-changing big that's going to come and sign with this program unless there's some diamond in the rough somewhere that you're scouting that nobody else is. But what I personally would like to see is somebody with a little bit more length, that you could put out there for 15 minutes a game, could excel from a rebounding perspective just with length and be a little bit of a shot blocker when needed. And you spell him with Kamari McGriff, Tyreek Smith, and you run with that at the 5.
Yeah, for me, it's very similar to what Matt said. I mean, I don't have any names out there. I'm not dwelling into the portal or anything like that. But for me, it's very simple. I need a 14-minute guy. I need 7 minutes per half, and I need all 5 of your fouls. That's what I want. I don't necessarily just somebody big that has relatively all right hands. I don't want him to even score in those 7 minutes per half. You don't have to do anything. As long as you can grab maybe 4 rebounds, 2 or 3, maybe 2 or 3 rebounds, even that, and foul the hell out of somebody. No easy baskets. If I'm wanting to bring in a second big or a third big, however you want to look at it, and you're going to play 7 minutes, I want you to make sure that they don't get any layups while you're in there. If you got to foul the other center, that's what I want from you. And I know that's very. I mean, basketball coaches are probably rolling over, laughing at me for how dumb that take is, but that's seriously what I want because it's so underutilized in college basketball. You're going to give up fouls anyway. I would rather have a guy designated on the team that is willing to just beat the hell out of the other team and foul them and get them probably their worst free throw shooter to the line. That's just what I want from a 14-minute center that's probably going to spell 2 other guys. That's what I want.
And hopefully you cost less than Ugana Onyenso did.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Ugana Onyenso was. He was a guy that could barely grab rebounds, and he was supposed to be this tremendous shot blocker. But
shit out of the basketball.
Yeah, but he just if it'd be a lot better than giving up a layup trying to block a shot. How about you foul him? Give me that. That's what I would
love that. I would love that. But they don't have many spots remaining. It's going to be interesting to see what unfolds with the Elias Rapique thing because we've offered the German guy. He's a forward, is my understanding. He's only like 6'6", so I wouldn't consider him a big necessarily. It's going to be interesting to see if he ends up committing or if he's already committed. I know the European stuff is always a little bit interesting, the way those play out with buyouts and all that good stuff. But I think that's going to do it for us tonight. There was a lot of ground to cover, but I think we did it as quickly and efficiently as we could in an hour and 17 minutes. Any parting thoughts from you boys before we get out of here? Let's
not be strangers. All right. Let's let this community be love. I feel like this is the year. I feel like I'm strapping a rocket to my back, and if I gotta carry you guys with me, we're going to the top. We're going to the top.
I'm still waiting for your ice cream review. Your Skyline.
I'm ready. Review. I'm ready whenever. Whenever.
On the next pod. Let's do it on the next pod.
I'll review the Bluebell cookie cake ice cream that just came out this week.
I'll tell my George Fitzpatrick story another time too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Should we tell that story real quick?
No.
I mean, it's not a long story.
It's not a long story.
Yeah, let's. Okay, Jeff, take us out. Finish us off. With your George Fitzpatrick story.
I hope this finds its way to George Fitzpatrick. I mean, an all-time classic. Because, I'm a 35-year-old man wearing my K-State gear. That's what I do. I just wear it everywhere I go. So I'm at the Memorial Tournaments. Shout out to Scotty Scheffler winning that tournament 2 years in a row. I'm not drunk. Shout out to Scotty. I'm trolling this party. I mean, there's right off of hole 6. house party with, all the companies are selling their stuff, trying to get people liquored up to sell insurance or whatever. I'm strolling through this sloshy mud pit, and I get to trying to get back to my people that I'm hanging out with. Shout out to my dad as one of them. And there's this giant, massive human. I mean, he's all of 6'6". And he said, "Go State, K-State, let's go." I was like, holy shit, what is that? I look up, and that's George Fitzpatrick. I know him right off rip. It's ingrained in my brain. I've seen his profile picture too many times not to know who that is. And I try to play it cool. I try to like, "What's up, George?" Give him the dap. "What's up?" He's like, "What are you doing here, man? K-State gear?" Like, the brand is huge. That's exactly what I tell him. The brand is huge. So embarrassing. But super chill guy. He's just talking. I mean, he gives me some nuggets on the offensive line, what we're looking like. I mean, maybe I'll share that on the pod. Maybe I'll have him share it. I don't know if we can ever get a hold of him. But yeah, I mean, he's with his former Ohio State buddies. Obviously, he's from Colorado, but he's in town, loves golf. So he's, hanging out with his buddies that have transferred to Cincinnati or still on the team or whatever. And have this picture taken. He's just a super cool guy. And I see him 4 or 5 times, and every time it's go Cats every time I see him. Yeah, but if we're talking physically, we got a left tackle. That dude is all the way there. A unit, if you will. So I was happy to see George Fitzpatrick, and also saw Gabe Powers' girlfriend. She made herself known to me as well. I didn't tell you guys that story. Saw her on the 14th tee box. She said, "Hey, do you go to K-State?" I was like, "No, I don't go to K-State, but I am a huge fan." She said, "My boyfriend plays for K-State." I said, "Challenge me. Let me figure out who it is." Obviously, I know if you're in Ohio, more likely it's the other Ohio State transfer. She says, "Do you know Gabe?" I say, "I know Gabe Powers very well." And it ended like that. Super nice lady. Gabe Powers, you got yourself a good one.
There we go. And with that, that's going to do it for us today. Once again, shout out to our sponsor, Auntie Mae's Parlor. Visit www.auntiemays.com for a full list of their upcoming events. Additionally, if you're stopping by Auntie Mae's, maybe you'll see Fireball Matt this week, since he happens to be in the hat right now, Man Happiness. So, if you see him, say hi. And if you're just going to the parlor and Matt's not there, be sure to tell him Cocaine Willie sent you. Additionally, we are the K-State representative on the College Huddle, which is the largest community of fan-driven content in the nation, and a very, very noisy Instagram or Twitter DM that I really haven't kept up on for the last 4 months. So I might need to go back through and have some AI bot summarize the chat for me from the last 4 months. But check them out at thecollegehuddle.com. Follow them on social media at College Huddle. And last but not least, you can follow our show at Cocaine Willie on YouTube, at TikTok, Twitter, or Instagram, or Blue Sky, or follow us individually. I'm at Bob Trollsby. Chef is at Chef Andre Napier, and Fireball Matt is at Matt Marchesini. Chef,
cocaine's a hell of a drug, baby.
We are all coke and no joke. Wildcat country. Let's ride.
Let's ride, baby. Yeah.
Yeah.